Since the dawn of time, one truth has united every culture, every civilization, every beating heart across the ages: the inevitable, universal mystery of death. It's a threshold every human must face, a silent question that echoes through our deepest fears and most profound wonderings. And yet, across the world, humanity hasn't simply surrendered to that fear. Instead, we've spun stories, crafted myths, and given shape to the invisible forces that guide souls from this world into whatever lies beyond. In the rich tapestry of these traditions, few figures capture the imagination or send quite as thrilling a chill down the spine as Japan's Shinigami. These aren't just grim reapers in a distant folktale. They are the real gods of death in Japanese mythology, complex, layered, and deeply woven into the nation's spiritual and cultural identity. Today, we're setting out on a journey deep into the heart of Japanese folklore, where death isn't an end but a transition overseen by enigmatic beings who are far more than mere harbingers of doom. The Shinigami stand at the crossroads of humanity's greatest existential questions, reflecting not just fear but respect, ritual, and a profound understanding of life's fragility. So often misunderstood or oversimplified in popular culture, these deities carry stories that reveal how an entire civilization grappled with mortality, honor, and the invisible balance between the realms of the living and the dead. What you're about to discover goes far beyond spooky tales or cartoonish grim reapers. We'll explore where the Shinigami came from, how they evolved from ancient beliefs and foreign influences, and why they occupy such a unique space in Japan's collective consciousness. From their haunting presence in classical literature to their role in modern anime and film, the real story of the Shinigami is one of nuance, power, and haunting beauty. So settle in, open your mind, and allow yourself to step into a world where death is not an enemy, but a sacred passage guided by gods whose stories have shaped a nation's soul for centuries. To truly understand these enigmatic figures, we first need to listen to the very name they are known by. The word Shinigami is a powerful piece of linguistic poetry, a key that unlocks a deeper understanding of how the Japanese worldview conceptualizes the force of death itself. It's written with two distinct kanji characters, each one a universe of meaning. The first character, I as Chinese letter, read as Shi, which simply and starkly means death. It's a definitive, unadorned symbol for the end of life. This is paired WITH Chinese letter, pronounced kami, a word that is often translated as God but carries far more nuance than that single English term can convey. A kami isn't necessarily an all-powerful omniscient deity in the Western sense. It can be a god, yes, but also a spirit, a sacred essence, or a divine presence that inhabits natural phenomena, objects, or even abstract concepts. So when you combine these two powerful ideas, you don't get a monolithic grim reaper. You get a death spirit, a death god, or more poetically, a divine entity of death. This name frames death not as a void or a mere event, but as a conscious force, a being with agency and a role in the cosmic order. What's fascinating and often surprising to many is that this now ubiquitous term is a relatively modern invention in Japan's long spiritual history. For centuries, the concept of a specific, personified god of death who actively seeks out the living to end their lives was largely absent from early Shinto and Buddhist traditions. Ancient Japanese beliefs treated death in a more abstract and ecological way. It was a natural part of a cycle, a transition that was managed by a collection of rituals and overseen by various deities associated with the afterlife, like the rulers of Yomi, the underworld. The idea of a singular, predatory death spirit coming to claim souls simply didn't fit the indigenous worldview, so where did the Shinigami come from? Scholars point to a fascinating period of cultural exchange during the Edo period, when Japanese thinkers began to encounter and reinterpret Western concepts. European folklore, with its personifications of death like the Grim Reaper, began to filter into Japan. This external influence seems to have acted as a catalyst, providing a new narrative framework that was then seamlessly absorbed and utterly transformed by the Japanese imagination. They didn't just copy the idea, they took the concept of a death bringer and fused it with their own existing beliefs about spirits, karma, and the sacredness of the life cycle, ultimately creating something entirely new and uniquely Japanese. The Shinigami was born from this cultural crossroads, a modern myth that feels ancient, a testament to Japan's incredible ability to synthesize foreign ideas into its own rich spiritual tapestry. Long before the term Shinigami ever entered the popular lexicon, the ancient Japanese understanding of death was profoundly different from the personified figure we recognize today. To step back into the world of early Shinto is to enter a spiritual landscape where death was not an event presided over by a single deity, but a pervasive natural force, deeply intertwined with concepts of purity and pollution. The central concept here is kegare, a form of spiritual impurity or defilement that was seen as a natural consequence of life events like childbirth, disease, and especially death. Unlike the Western concept of sin, kegare was not a moral failing. It was more like a spiritual stain, a temporary state of contamination that could be cleansed through specific rituals and purification rites. Because death was the ultimate source of this pollution, it created a cultural attitude of cautious reverence and at times avoidance towards the deceased and anything associated with them. This world, you had no need for a Grim Reaper figure. Death itself was the abstract force to be managed, and the focus was on protecting the living community from its lingering spiritual taint. In the absence of one singular god of death, the responsibility for the end of life and the journey thereafter was distributed among a fascinating pantheon of spirits, demons, and underworld deities. The most powerful and poignant of these is undoubtedly Izanami no Mikoto. She is not a Shinigami, but rather a primordial creator goddess whose story inexorably leads her to become the ruler of the land of the dead, Yomi. According to the Kabuki, Japan's oldest chronicle, Izanami and her partner Izanagi gave birth to the islands of Japan and a great many of its gods. Tragically, Izanami died while giving birth to the fire god Kagetsuchi. Her grief-stricken husband, Izanagi, journeyed into the dark underworld of Yomi to retrieve her. He found her, but she warned him not to look at her as she had consumed the food of the dead and was now one with that realm. In a moment of human weakness, Izanagi lit a torch and beheld her horrifying, decaying form. Humiliated and enraged, Izanami transformed into a vengeful deity, promising to take 1,000 lives every day as punishment. This myth provides a crucial foundation for the Japanese concept of death. It is a polluted, irreversible realm separate from the world of the living, and even the gods are subject to its power. Izanami becomes a terrifying, powerful figure associated with death, but she is its ruler, not its agent. She commands from Yomi, but she does not roam the world of the living to claim souls. Beyond this foundational myth, the spiritual ecosystem was populated by a host of other beings connected to mortality. There were onryo, vengeful ghosts whose powerful emotions at the moment of a wrongful or sudden death allowed their spirits to remain and curse the living. There were also various yokai or supernatural monsters, some of whom were associated with causing misfortune or disease which could lead to death. The process of dying and the fate of the soul were also heavily influenced by the arrival of Buddhism from China around the 6th century. Buddhist cosmology introduced complex ideas about judgment, reincarnation, and specific afterlife realms, such as the Pure Land or various hells, each overseen by its own judges and guardians like the ox-headed and horse-headed demons. This rich tapestry of beliefs meant that the journey from life to death was a communal spiritual effort involving rituals to appease the dead, prayers to guide their soul to a peaceful rest, and practices to purify the living from the kegare of loss. It was a system managed by many, not commanded by one, reflecting a worldview where death was a natural, if feared, part of a continuous cycle. This profound shift in thinking arrived with the introduction of Buddhism from the Asian mainland, a cultural and spiritual tsunami that would forever reshape Japan's understanding of what happens after we die. Prior to Buddhism, the indigenous Shinto view of the afterlife was somewhat vague and geographically focused. The polluted land of Yomi was a shadowy, static destination, a final resting place from which there was no return and little hope for individual progression. Buddhism, however, brought with it an intricate and highly structured cosmic bureaucracy for the soul. It introduced the powerful, inescapable law of karma, the idea that one's actions in this life directly determine the quality and nature of the next. Death was no longer just an end, but a pivotal moment of judgment, a gateway to a cycle of rebirth through 6 possible realms, from the blissful heavens down to the terrifying torments of hell. This new framework required a new caste of divine administrators to manage the process, and at the head of this post-mortem judiciary sat a figure who would become absolutely central to Japanese conceptions of the underworld, Enma Deo. Known as Yama in Sanskrit, Enma is a formidable and imposing deity. He is the king of hell, the supreme judge before whom every soul must stand after death. Japanese art often depicts him as a stern, bearded official dressed in the robes of a Chinese magistrate, surrounded by demonic attendants and holding a register that contains the complete record of a person's life. His role is not one of arbitrary punishment, but of meticulous, unwavering judgment. He weighs a soul's good deeds against its bad with terrifying precision, consulting a mystical mirror that reflects the entire truth of a person's existence, leaving no lie or hidden sin unexposed. Based on this divine audit, Enma passes sentence, directing souls to their appropriate karmic destination. This concept of a judging deity was a revolutionary addition to the Japanese spiritual landscape. For the first time, death was not just a natural transition or a source of pollution, but a moment of profound moral accountability overseen by a specific, powerful entity. It is here, in the courtroom of Enma, that we find a crucial piece of the puzzle in the evolution of the Shinigami. While Enma himself is a sovereign who judges souls already delivered to him, his kingdom requires functionaries, messengers, and enforcers to carry out the cosmic order. Buddhist law populated his court with a host of such beings. Most notable are the demonic Oni who serve as his bailiffs and torturers, and the pair of feared emissaries known as the Ox Head and Horse Face guards, who are sometimes said to be dispatched to the human world to collect the souls of the deceased. These figures provided a foundational template, divine agents whose specific purpose was related to the facilitation of death and the transportation of the soul into the afterlife. They were not the cause of death itself, but they were its undeniable heralds and escorts. This idea of a supernatural being acting as an agent of the underworld, operating under a larger karmic system, planted a seed that would centuries later blossom into the Shinigami. The Shinigami would inherit this role of intermediary, but with a crucial difference: they would often be portrayed as operating within the world of the living, influencing the moment of death itself, not just processing the soul after the fact. The Buddhist influence provided the structured cosmology and the first archetypes of death-related operatives. The Japanese imagination would later refine these concepts into something more intimate, more personal, and in many ways even more haunting. This era of newfound stability and cultural blossoming provided the perfect fertile ground for the Shinigami to step out of the shadows of abstract concepts and into the vivid world of popular storytelling. For the first time, the idea of death was given a tangible, narrative form that everyday people could encounter in theaters and storybooks. These weren't the distant, judgmental deities of the Buddhist pantheon. These were beings that operated on the streets and in the homes of common folk, making them far more relatable and immediately terrifying. In the bustling urban centers like Edo, now Tokyo, a new form of drama was captivating audiences, Kabuki theater. With its dramatic makeup, elaborate staging, and focus on thrilling, often supernatural stories, Kabuki became a powerful vehicle for bringing the Shinigami to life. Playwrights began to weave these death spirits into their plots, not merely as monsters but as narrative devices imbued with profound moral purpose. A common trope emerged where a character, often someone who had contemplated suicide or made a foolish pact with dark forces, would be confronted by a Shinigami. These encounters were rarely just about claiming a soul. They were dramatic lessons on the squandering of life, the consequences of despair, or the futility of cheating fate. The Shinigami on stage became a mirror held up to the audience, reflecting the societal values of the time, emphasizing the importance of living a righteous life and accepting one's predetermined lifespan or inen. Parallel to the stage, a rich tradition of oral storytelling and printed woodblock literature known as kibyoushi and kusazoshi further cemented the Shinigami's place in the public imagination. These cheap, widely available booklets were the popular novels of their day, filled with ghost stories, moral fables, and tales of the strange. Here, the Shinigami was often depicted in a way that blended the imported concept of the Western Grim Reaper with distinctly Japanese sensibilities. They weren't typically pictured with a scythe. Instead, they might be shown as a pair of shadows, a pale figure in a white robe, or a spectral being that could only be seen by those on the verge of death. Their modus operandi was also uniquely crafted. One prevalent folk belief described Shinigami as low-ranking, almost clerical spirits working for Judge Enma. Their role was to ensure that a person's time of death, as written on a celestial ledger, was carried out precisely. They didn't cause death through malice, they merely facilitated a preordained event. In some tales, they might even be tricked or reasoned with, highlighting a very human desire to negotiate with the inevitable. This portrayal served a crucial social function in a society that prized order and accepting one's station. The Shinigami became the personification of that cosmic order, a reminder that every life had a measured course, and to disrupt it, through suicide, violence, or reckless behavior, was to go against the natural way of the universe. They were the ultimate teachers of Akarimaru, the acceptance of things that cannot be changed. This crucial distinction transforms the Shinigami from a figure of terror into something far more nuanced, a guide, a spiritual escort ensuring a soul does not lose its way in the critical moments after death. Where the Western Grim Reaper is often portrayed as an active force, a harvester who decisively causes death, the Shinigami operates on a principle of inevitability. Their purpose is not to decide who dies, but to ensure that a death, once its preordained time has come, proceeds according to a cosmic plan. This ties directly into the profound Japanese concept of shukume, or inescapable fate. A person's lifespan is viewed as a thread of predetermined length. The Shinigami's role is simply to be present at the thread's end, not to cut it short themselves. They are less like a hunter and more like a usher in the grand theater of existence, there to direct you to your next seat once the performance of your life has concluded. This function as a psychopomp is deeply woven into the fabric of Japanese spiritual beliefs about the soul's journey. It was commonly thought that the soul could become confused, disoriented, or even trapped near the physical world immediately after death, potentially leading it to become a restless spirit or an onryo if not properly guided. The Shinigami solves this problem. They provide a clear, authoritative presence that helps the newly deceased soul recognize its state and accept its transition, gently leading it away from the attachments of the living world and toward the bureaucratic halls of the afterlife to stand before Judge Enma. This guidance is often depicted as a quiet, almost somber duty. In many folk tales and artistic representations, you might see two Shinigami working together, one to hold the soul and the other to guide it, emphasizing the coordinated and deliberate nature of their task. The tools and methods of the Shinigami further highlight their role as facilitators rather than executioners. While the Grim Reaper famously wields a scythe, an instrument of cutting and harvesting, the Shinigami is rarely associated with such a violent implement. Instead, they are more often shown with objects that signify record-keeping and binding. They might carry a ledger, a scroll, or a list, a direct reference to the celestial registry where every person's fate is written. Their instrument might be a rope or a chain, not to strangle or harm, but to symbolically tether the soul and lead it onward. Some stories even describe them using a mallet to gently tap the soul free from its physical body, a far cry from the violent imagery often associated with death in other cultures. These depictions reinforce the idea that the Shinigami is an administrator of fate, a cosmic civil servant ensuring the machinery of life and death operates smoothly and according to plan. This perspective offers a fascinating window into a cultural comfort with the natural order of things. The presence of the Shinigami, while still eerie, provides a strange sense of structure and reassurance. Death is not a random, chaotic accident, but a scheduled event with a guide waiting to ensure a safe passage. This belief system helps to contextualize and manage the profound grief and fear associated with loss, framing it within a larger, more orderly universe where every soul has a designated path and a being tasked with helping them find it. The entire process begins not with a scythe but with a ledger. Deep within the cosmic bureaucracy of the afterlife, it's believed that a master record exists, a celestial book detailing the precise lifespan of every single person. This isn't a suggestion or a rough estimate. It's an unchangeable decree, a fixed point on a timeline that even the gods themselves are bound to follow. The Shinigami's primary duty is to act as a cosmic functionary, an envoy dispatched from the underworld to ensure this divine schedule is executed with perfect accuracy. Their mission isn't to hunt or to harvest, but to locate a specific soul at a specific moment and facilitate its transition, acting as the bridge between a predetermined fate and its physical manifestation in our world. So how does a Shinigami actually claim a soul? The methods described in folklore are far more subtle and psychological than a physical attack. Since the moment of death is already fated, the Shinigami rarely needs to use brute force. Instead, they are masters of influence and illusion, often working on the mind of their intended target. A common trope in Edo period stories involves the Shinigami employing trickery to lead a person toward their own demise. They might create an overwhelming, irrational impulse, a sudden, irresistible desire to lean over a high balcony or to step in front of a speeding cart. They could manifest a visual or auditory hallucination, causing someone to misstep on a safe path or walk directly into danger. In these tales, the Shinigami doesn't push the victim. They simply arrange the circumstances and manipulate the person's own perceptions, making the inevitable death appear to be a tragic accident or a moment of profound personal folly. This reinforces the idea that they are facilitators of fate, not its architects. They ensure the how aligns with the when that is already written. Another powerful and poignant image associated with their work is the concept of the life thread. Drawing from a broader East Asian mythological tradition, some stories envision each person's life as a single, glowing thread or cord, its length representing the duration of their lifespan. The Shinigami's role is to be present at the exact moment that thread is meant to be severed. But even here, the action is often passive. The thread isn't cut prematurely, it simply reaches its end, and the Shinigami is there to witness its parting and immediately collect the soul that is released. This imagery moves the Shinigami even further from an active reaper to a solemn witness, a divine notary public stamping a certificate at the moment of expiration. This raises a fascinating question. What happens if a Shinigami makes a mistake? Folklore occasionally explores this tension, presenting stories where a desperate individual might outwit a bumbling or inattentive Shinigami who has arrived for the wrong person or at the wrong time. These narratives serve a dual purpose. On one hand, they provide a thrilling, human-centric story of cheating death, which is a universal fantasy. On a deeper level, they reinforce the supreme importance of the celestial ledger. The very fact that tricking a Shinigami is presented as a temporary reprieve, a glitch in the system that is always eventually corrected, ultimately underscores the inviolable nature of fate. You might hide from the messenger, but you cannot escape the message itself. The ledger's decree will always be fulfilled. Unlike the consistent, skeletal Grim Reaper of the West, the Shinigami refuses to be pinned down to a single, terrifying form. Their visual identity in Japanese art and storytelling is a masterclass in ambiguity, designed to reflect their deceptive function as facilitators of fate rather than monstrous bringers of doom. You won't find a universal Shinigami uniform. Instead, their appearance is a fluid thing, shifting to serve the story and the deeper psychological message behind their presence. One of the most common and unsettling depictions is that of a shadowy, indistinct figure. They might appear as a dark, human-shaped silhouette with no discernible features, or as a wispy, ethereal form that seems to be made of smoke and gloom. This lack of definition is deeply intentional. It represents death itself, an intangible, unknowable force that can be felt but never truly seen until the very end. It emphasizes that the Shinigami is not of our world, a being that exists just outside the edges of our perception, operating in the spaces between light and dark. In stark contrast to these vague shadows, some tales present Shinigami that are disarmingly ordinary. They might take the form of a humble traveler, a quiet monk on a pilgrimage, or a nondescript townsfolk who blends seamlessly into a crowd. This is perhaps their most cunning disguise. By appearing as someone utterly normal, the Shinigami can approach their intended target without triggering alarm, engaging them in conversation or simply observing until the fated moment arrives. This portrayal drives home a chilling idea. Death does not always arrive with a dramatic fanfare. It can be mundane, casual, and waiting right beside you, utterly unnoticed until it is too late. This ordinary human facade makes their ultimate purpose all the more shocking and reminds us that profound transitions can begin in the most everyday of moments. Then there are the depictions that draw directly from the Buddhist cosmology they so often serve. In this context, a Shinigami might appear in the terrifying guise of an oni or demon, a hulking, muscular figure with sharp claws, wild hair, and brightly colored skin, often red or blue. They might carry iron clubs or be adorned with tiger skin loincloths, visually linking them to the enforcers of Enma's court in hell. This fearsome appearance communicates the raw, terrifying power and inevitability of death, especially for those whose karmic ledger has destined them for a painful end or judgment. It's a reminder of the divine punishment aspect of the afterlife, making the Shinigami a symbol of dread and cosmic retribution. But the most psychologically complex and haunting representations are those that subvert our expectations entirely. Some stories and woodblock prints show the Shinigami as a beautiful, serene woman, often dressed in an elegant white kimono, a color traditionally associated with death and mourning in Japan. This beautiful visage is a profound deception. It makes the soul more willing to follow, disarming the dying person with a face of comfort and peace rather than one of horror. This embodiment suggests that death can be a merciful release, a gentle guide leading one away from a world of suffering. It plays on the dual nature of death itself. It is both a terrifying end and a potential comfort, a thief of life and a reliever of pain. The Shinigami's ever-changing face holds up a mirror to our own deepest anxieties and desires about mortality, proving that its true power lies not in a fixed image, but in its perfect, haunting adaptability. Perhaps one of the most famous and illustrative tales of the Shinigami's role is the enduring story of the man who didn't want to die. This classic folktale perfectly encapsulates the core themes of fate, consequence, and the Shinigami's specific function within the cosmic order. It begins with a kind but impoverished man who, through a twist of fortune, finds himself with a unique and terrifying ability. He can suddenly see the Shinigami walking among the living. At first, this sight fills him with dread, but his fear soon turns to desperate courage when he witnesses a Shinigami enter the home of a beloved neighbor, a young mother who has been ill. The Shinigami positions itself at the head of her bed, and the man knows this is a sign that her time has come. Overwhelmed by compassion for her family, he devises a plan. He distracts the Shinigami, engages it in conversation, and through a clever ruse, manages to physically move the weakened woman from her bed, placing her where the spirit is not standing. To his immense relief, the woman's health begins to improve almost instantly, and the Shinigami, seemingly thwarted, departs without its intended soul. Elated by his success, the man believes he has cheated death itself. He has saved a life and proven that fate can be rewritten, but his triumph is short-lived. The following day, he sees the same Shinigami again, this time heading toward a different part of town. His curiosity piqued and his confidence bolstered, he follows. The Shinigami enters the home of a wealthy but cruel moneylender known for his greed and harsh treatment of others. This time, the spirit does not stand at the head of the sick man's bed but at his feet. Remembering his previous victory, the man assumes the Shinigami's position indicates where death will occur. Believing he is acting as an agent of justice, he decides to intervene once more, but this time to ensure the moneylender's death. He quietly moves the ailing man so that his head lies where the Shinigami was stationed. To his horror, the opposite of his intention occurs. The moneylender immediately recovers, springing from his bed with renewed vigor. The man is utterly confused until the Shinigami turns to him with a patient but firm explanation. The spirit reveals the truth of its celestial duty. Its presence in a room was never the cause of death, but a marker for its facilitation. When it stood at the head of the young mother's bed, it was because her thread of life had reached its natural end. Its role was to be there to gently guide her soul away. By moving her, the well-intentioned man had not saved her, but instead forced her soul to remain trapped in a body that was meant to expire, condemning her to a prolonged state of suffering between life and death. Conversely, when the Shinigami stood at the feet of the moneylender, it was because that man's predetermined time had not yet come. The spirit was waiting for the moment it could rightfully begin its work. By moving the man to that spot, the eager mortal had not hastened a deserved death, but had instead gifted the wicked man an unnatural extension of his life, adding years of misery for those he would exploit. The story ends with a solemn lesson. The celestial ledger is infallible, and the Shinigami is merely its messenger. To interfere with its precise operation is to unleash chaos, demonstrating that human judgment is flawed and our attempts to alter fate, even with the best intentions, often lead to far greater and more unintended misfortune than the natural order ever would. This complex relationship between the Shinigami and the celestial ledger brings us to one of the most somber and troubling aspects of their folklore, their association with suicide. While many tales present these death spirits as impartial facilitators of a natural lifespan, a darker thread of stories emerged, particularly during the Edo period, that cast them in a far more manipulative and sinister light. In these narratives, the Shinigami transforms from a passive witness into an active tempter, one who preys on human despair. This concept is most chillingly encapsulated in the term Jugoku-tsuhai, literally Hell's Messenger. This wasn't just a name, it was a warning. A Jugoku-tsuhai was a specific type of Shinigami whose role was not to meet a soul at its predestined end, but to actively seek out those teetering on the brink of emotional collapse and push them over the edge, effectively recruiting souls for the underworld through deception and coercion. The mechanics of this temptation were psychological warfare. Folklore describes these spirits seeking out individuals burdened by overwhelming grief, shame, poverty, or unrequited love. They would not appear as monstrous demons, but rather as whispers in the dark, as sudden and intrusive thoughts that felt like the person's own. A jugoku-tsu-hai might create vivid illusions, showing a despairing person an image of their own funeral where loved ones were finally at peace without them. Or it might fabricate voices that relentlessly insisted their suffering was endless and that death was the only escape. The most powerful tool in their arsenal was the manipulation of perception itself. They could turn a sturdy beam in a ceiling into what looked like the perfect solution for a noose, or make a calm river appear to be a welcoming, gentle end to pain. The act of suicide in these stories was rarely portrayed as a freely chosen decision, but as the final, successful trick of a predatory spirit that exploited a moment of profound human weakness. This bleak folklore did not emerge in a vacuum. It was a direct reflection of deep-seated societal anxieties during a time of significant social stratification and economic hardship. The rigid class system of the Edo period, combined with periodic famines and widespread poverty, created conditions where many people felt trapped in inescapable suffering. The stories of jugoku-tsu-hai served as a powerful, albeit grim, form of social commentary and caution. They framed suicide not just as a personal sin or failure, but as a victory for a malevolent external force. By externalizing the impulse, these tales offered a way to articulate the profound terror of despair while also issuing a stark warning. To give in to such thoughts was to become a pawn in a cosmic game, to have one's final act be not an exercise of free will but a submission to manipulation. It was a narrative that both explained a societal ill and attempted to deter it by associating it with the ultimate spiritual corruption. This portrayal also created a complex theological conflict with the Buddhist principles that underpinned much of Shinigami lore. Buddhism traditionally views suicide as a negative karmic action, an interruption of one's natural lifespan that can lead to a troubled rebirth as a restless spirit. The idea of a Shinigami, a being ostensibly part of the karmic system, actively encouraging such an act seems like a contradiction. This tension is where the folklore reveals its deepest layer. The jugoku-tsu-hai stories suggest the existence of rogue agents or corrupt lower-tier spirits within the cosmic order, being so desperate to fill their quotas for Enma's court that they would break the very rules they were meant to uphold. They represent a terrifying corruption of the natural cycle, turning what should be a sacred transition into a predatory hunt. In doing so, these tales gave a name and a face to the invisible, gnawing pain of depression long before it was understood as a medical condition, personifying the internal voice of despair as a supernatural enemy one must resist at all costs. While the overarching concept of the Shinigami provides a national framework, the spirit of these tales was never confined to a single, rigid doctrine. As these stories traveled from bustling port cities to remote mountain villages, they were lovingly adapted, reinterpreted, and infused with the unique character of each locality, creating a stunning tapestry of regional variations. The Shinigami of the northeastern Tohoku region, for instance, often carries the solemn, chilling weight of its environment. In the prefectures of Akita and Aomori, known for their long, harsh winters and deep, isolating snows, the Shinigami is frequently depicted as a silent, patient hunter linked directly to the unforgiving climate. One prevalent tale describes the spirit not as a single entity, but as a pair of shadows that follows a person home during a blizzard, their presence signaled only by a second set of footprints appearing in the snow behind your own. This version reflects a very real historical fear of yukishini or snow death, where getting lost in a whiteout could mean a frozen end. Here, the Shinigami is less a bureaucratic agent and more an embodiment of the land itself, a natural force as inevitable and pervasive as the winter cold, a reminder that nature holds the final say. Venture southwest to the island of Kyushu, with its history of vibrant foreign trade and a warmer, more temperate climate, and you find a Shinigami with a distinctly different personality. Influenced by centuries of cultural exchange with China and Korea through port cities like Nagasaki, the Kyushu death spirit often takes on a more communal, almost familial role. In Kagoshima and Miyazaki prefectures, a common belief held that a Shinigami would rarely come alone to a household. Instead, it was said they arrived in pairs or small groups, almost like underworld social workers. Their purpose was not just to collect a single soul, but to assess the overall spiritual health of a home, ensuring that the proper rituals for ancestors were being observed. A tale from this region might involve a Shinigami engaging the family in conversation, testing their generosity and piety before deciding the fate of an ailing member. This transforms the spirit from a solitary specter of doom into a figure deeply integrated with the Confucian-inspired values of family duty and respect for the dead, highlighting how local social structures shaped the very nature of the supernatural. The Kansai region, encompassing ancient capitals like Kyoto and Nara, offers yet another fascinating perspective. As the heartland of classical Japanese culture and Buddhism, the Shinigami here is often portrayed with a heightened sense of ritual and ceremonial importance. Stories from around Kyoto frequently depict the spirit in the refined but eerie guise of a noblewoman or a low-ranking court official, its speech polite and dripping with archaic nuance. Its methods are subtle and psychological, often involving complex wordplay or the exploitation of a person's attachment to artistic beauty or social standing. A famous Osaka Rakugo comedic story tells of a Shinigami who debates a man on the merits of a particular painting, using the distraction to claim his soul. This reflects the region's historical identity as a center of art, intellect, and high culture, where even death was expected to arrive with a certain level of sophistication and cunning, mirroring the complexities of human society itself. These regional differences were not merely cosmetic, they served as a powerful form of localized moral instruction. The specific fears and values of a community were projected onto the canvas of the Shinigami, making the lessons they taught immediately relevant to the people who told these stories. In a fishing village, the Shinigami might be associated with sudden storms and treacherous waves, teaching respect for the sea. In a farming community, it could be linked to drought or famine, emphasizing the fragility of life and the importance of preparing for lean times. This beautiful diversity proves that the Shinigami was never a static monster from a national handbook, but a living, evolving piece of folklore. It was a concept flexible enough to be molded by the landscape, economy, and spiritual concerns of every corner of Japan, providing a unique window into the myriad ways our ancestors sought to understand the one experience that unites us all. While the stage and the storybook gave the Shinigami a narrative life, it was the visual arts of the Edo period that truly seared their image into the collective consciousness of Japan. The rise of ukiyo-e, the famed woodblock prints known as pictures of the floating world, provided a mass medium that could bring these spectral beings into the homes of common people with stunning, reproducible clarity. Artists of this era didn't just illustrate the Shinigami, they interpreted them using every tool at their disposal: line, color, composition, and symbolism, to explore the profound and unsettling relationship between beauty and mortality. In their hands, the Shinigami became more than a folk tale. They became an aesthetic experience, a visual philosophy that grappled with the very essence of life's fleeting nature. The artistic depictions of Shinigami were masterclasses in deliberate contradiction, designed to evoke a sense of unsettling unease rather than straightforward terror. A common technique was to render the death spirit with an unexpected and ethereal beauty. We see this in prints where the Shinigami appears as a graceful, pale-faced figure draped in flowing, white robes, the traditional color of mourning in Japan. This visual choice is deeply disarming. It suggests a serene acceptance, even a gentle invitation, making the idea of death appear less like a violent theft and more like a tranquil passing into another state. The horror is not in a monstrous visage but in the calm allure of the figure, the way its peaceful demeanor contrasts so sharply with the mortal panic of its intended target. This juxtaposition reflects a core Buddhist tenet present in much of ukiyo-e, the idea that attachment to life is the source of suffering and that release from it can be a form of salvation. The beautiful Shinigami becomes a mirror, reflecting the viewer's own complicated feelings about the end of life. Yet, this beauty was almost always undercut by subtle, chilling details that revealed the being's true nature. A beautifully rendered hand might taper into long, claw-like fingernails. A serene face might be glimpsed in profile, revealing a hollow cheek or an eye that is just a bit too dark and empty. The most powerful tool in the ukiyo-e artist's kit was the use of negative space and unfinished lines to create a sense of intangibility. Shinigami were often depicted as semi-transparent, their forms blending into shadows or mist, as if they were not fully present in our world but existing just on the other side of a veil. This technique, achieved through delicate gradations of ink and skillful carving, visually reinforced their role as psychopomps, beings that straddle the boundary between the living and the dead. They are shown walking through walls or floating just above the floorboards, their insubstantial forms emphasizing that they are guides for the soul, not physical threats to the body. One cannot discuss the standardization of the Shinigami's image without mentioning the towering influence of Tsukioka Yoshitoshi, arguably the last great master of ukiyo-e. Living in the tumultuous Meiji era, a time when Japan was rapidly modernizing and westernizing, Yoshitoshi's work often looked backward, drawing on folklore and history with a psychologically intense and hauntingly modern style. His series, 100 Aspects of the Moon, contains some of the most iconic Shinigami images ever created. In one print titled The Moon of the Milky Way, the Shinigami is depicted as a gaunt, almost melancholic figure holding a mirror that reflects no image, symbolizing the void of death. Another famous work, often associated with Shinigami lore, shows the poetess Ono no Komachi in her old age, haunted by a spectral figure that represents her past beauty and impending death, a perfect fusion of the personal and the mythological. Yoshitoshi's Shinigami are not mere monsters, they are deeply psychological entities laden with sorrow, duty, and a weary inevitability. His artistic vision, widely circulated through prints, did more than any single text to crystallize a specific, emotionally complex image of the death spirit in the public mind. Beyond the single sheet print, Shinigami permeated other art forms, each adapting the figure to its own strengths. In Kabuki theater, the actors' stylized makeup and exaggerated posture, frozen in a dramatic Mai pose, became a living representation of the Shinigami, translating the two-dimensional print into a powerful three-dimensional performance. In painted scrolls known as emaki, artists could show the Shinigami's narrative function, depicting sequential scenes of the spirit approaching, interacting with, and finally leading away a soul, emphasizing its role in a story rather than as a static icon. This cross-pollination across media created a rich and cohesive visual language around death. A commoner might see a cheap woodblock print of a Shinigami in a folktale booklet, then witness a similar figure brought to life on the Kabuki stage, and finally encounter a more refined version in a wealthy merchant's painting. This repetition across different artistic contexts standardized the core visual tropes: the pale face, the dark robes, the ethereal form, while also allowing for creative interpretation, ensuring the Shinigami remained a dynamic and evolving symbol in Japan's visual culture. The transition of the Shinigami from the woodblock prints and Kabuki stages of the Edo period into the pages of modern literature represents a profound evolution, one where these death spirits were given not just form, but inner lives, motivations, and a complex psychological depth that their folkloric predecessors only hinted at. This metamorphosis began in earnest during the Meiji and Taisho eras, a period of intense cultural fermentation in Japan, as authors began to use the Shinigami not merely as a spectral plot device, but as a powerful literary symbol to explore the modern human condition, its anxieties, its loneliness, and its search for meaning in an increasingly industrialized and uncertain world. One of the earliest and most influential literary works to reimagine the Shinigami was Shuko Tsuneoka's 1920 short story, Shinigami. In Tsuneoka's hands, the figure is utterly transformed from an impersonal force of nature into a deeply relatable, almost tragic character. His Shinigami is a weary, solitary bureaucrat, a lonely functionary who grows emotionally invested in the very humans whose lives he is destined to end. This portrayal was a brilliant reflection of its time, mirroring the feelings of alienation and the soul-crumbing weight of modern bureaucracy that many Japanese people were beginning to experience. The Shinigami was no longer a monster from hell. He was the guy in the office next door, burdened by the existential dread of his own grim profession, yearning for connection in a role that demanded absolute emotional detachment. This humanization was a watershed moment, establishing a template that countless future authors would build upon, using the Shinigami as a lens to examine what it means to be human by contrasting it with a being who performs the most inhuman of tasks. This trend of psychological exploration continued with the iconic novelist and playwright Tun Satomi, who further fleshed out the Shinigami's inner world in his works. Satomi's death gods are philosophers and melancholic observers of humanity, often engaging in long, poetic dialogues about the nature of life, fate, and free will. In his stories, the act of collecting a soul becomes a deeply philosophical exchange, a meeting of two consciousnesses at the most critical juncture imaginable. This treatment elevated the Shinigami from a simple antagonist or harbinger to a narrative vehicle for asking the biggest questions. The focus shifted from the shock of death itself to the profound conversation that could occur in its immediate presence, allowing authors to delve into themes of regret, acceptance, and the evaluation of a life's worth directly through the interaction between the mortal and the divine agent. The stage was thus perfectly set for the Shinigami's monumental leap into the world of manga in the latter half of the 20th century. The visual and narrative flexibility of the comic book medium allowed creators to explode every possible convention surrounding these beings, taking the foundational ideas established in literature and pushing them into thrilling new dimensions. An early and enormously influential example is Mizuki Shigeru's GGG no Kataro, which began serialization in 1960. While featuring a vast pantheon of yokai, the series often included Shinigami-like entities, depicting them with Mizuki's signature blend of the spooky and the silly. His versions could be fearsome, comical, or even pitiable, but they were always integrated into a world where the supernatural was an everyday reality. This approach made the concept of a death god accessible and engaging to younger audiences, demystifying them while still honoring their folkloric roots. However, it was in the pages of shonen manga that the Shinigami truly underwent its most radical and popular transformation. The genre's need for clear rules, power systems, and relatable protagonists forced a complete reimagining of what a death god could be. No longer merely guides or philosophers, Shinigami in these stories became warriors, detectives, and heroes with their own societies, rivalries, and intricate codes of conduct. They were given tangible tools, specific abilities, and most importantly, definable weaknesses. This systematization turned the abstract concept of death into something that could be understood, challenged, and even fought against, which is a cornerstone fantasy for the adolescent experience. The Shinigami became a career path, a species, or a supernatural office job, complete with its own internal politics and hierarchies, making the unfathomable suddenly feel structured and knowable. This creative explosion in manga did more than just entertain. It fundamentally expanded the symbolic vocabulary of the Shinigami for a new generation. They became metaphors for the burdens of responsibility, the struggle against conformity, and the fight against corrupt systems. A Shinigami character could now be a rebel against the very cosmic order it served, a hero who uses the power of death to protect life, or a complex anti-villain with understandable, even noble motivations. By grafting robust personalities and intricate worlds onto the skeletal frame of folklore, manga authors ensured the Shinigami would remain a vital and endlessly adaptable part of Japan's storytelling currency, perfectly poised for their eventual global conquest through the medium of anime. And then, in 2003, the global perception of the Shinigami was irrevocably and spectacularly shattered by the bored flick of a single apple. The manga and anime series Death Note didn't just introduce these death gods to a new international audience. It completely re-engineered them for the modern age, crafting a complex and captivating mythology that both honored and utterly subverted centuries of Japanese tradition. At the heart of this revolution were two of the most iconic Shinigami ever conceived, the nihilistic, apple-obsessed Ryuk and the tragically devoted Rem. Through them, creator Tsugumi Oba and artist Takeshi Obata presented a vision of the afterlife that was less about spiritual guidance and more about a chilling, rule-based game of cosmic power and moral consequence. Ryuk stands as the ultimate subversion of the folkloric Shinigami. In traditional tales, these beings are dutiful bureaucrats, solemnly fulfilling their roles in the cosmic machinery. Ryuk, by stark contrast, is the embodiment of profound, universe-spanning boredom. His initial motivation for dropping a death note, a notebook that allows its human owner to kill anyone whose name is written in it, into the human world is not to fulfill a quota or serve a higher purpose. He does it purely for his own amusement, a desperate attempt to alleviate the crushing ennui of an immortal existence in his desolate, grey homeland. This concept of the Shinigami realm is a radical departure from the structured courts of Enma. It's a purgatorial wasteland inhabited by beings who are neither good nor evil, but simply exist, gambling and waiting for an eternity without meaning. Ryuk's design reinforces this alien indifference. With his gargoyle-like posture, leathery wings, insane grin, and glowing yellow eyes, he is a figure of terrifying spectacle. Yet his demeanor is often casual, even comical, especially when he's groveling for his next hit of what he calls the apple of the human world. He is not a guide or a judge. He is a spectator, a chaotic neutral force who watches the brilliant and monstrous game played by the human protagonist, Light Yagami, with the detached glee of someone watching a thrilling reality television show. If Ryuk represents the subversion of the Shinigami's role, then his counterpart, Rem, represents the subversion of its emotional core. In many ways, Rem is a far more traditional figure. She is a being of duty and powerful, unwavering loyalty. However, this loyalty is not directed toward a cosmic system or a god like Enma. Instead, it is fiercely, fatally devoted to a human, the model Misa Amain. This profound emotional attachment is the ultimate taboo in the Death Note universe and the key to Rem's tragic arc. The rules established in the series state that a Shinigami who extends a human's lifespan for love or to save them must pay the ultimate price. They will die and turn to dust. This rule is a brilliant narrative device that directly inverts the folkloric concept of the Jugoku Tsuhai, the Hell's Messenger who tempts humans to die. Here, it is the Shinigami who is tempted to sacrifice itself for the sake of a human life. Rem's design reflects this Soma dignity. She is tall, slender, and androgynous, with a white, mask-like face and a voice that is calm and measured, projecting an aura of ancient sorrow and resolve that stands in sharp contrast to Ryuk's grotesque theatricality. The genius of Death Note's world-building lies in its intricate, legalistic set of rules for the Death Notes themselves. This framework transforms the act of killing from a spiritual transition into a cold, intellectual exercise. There are rules for how names must be written, the need to visualize a face, the ability to specify time and manner of death, and even the consequences of ideals that trade lifespan for supernatural sight. This complex system bureaucratizes death in a way that is both modern and terrifying, mirroring society's obsession with regulations and loopholes. It removes any notion of divine judgment or karmic balance. Death becomes a transaction, a function of information and intent. The Shinigami are no longer facilitators of a preordained fate, but merely the initial suppliers of the weapon. The ultimate choice and the resulting moral corruption belongs entirely to the human who wields it. Light Yagami doesn't cheat a bumbling Shinigami. He masterfully manipulates the rules of the very tool it gave him, embarking on a god complex of apocalyptic proportions. By fusing these elements, a bored trickster god, a tragically loving guardian, and a rigid set of supernatural laws, Death Note created a new, globally recognized archetype. It took the Shinigami out of the snowstorm and the peasant's hut and placed it in the high-stakes world of modern crime, psychology, and moral philosophy. The series asked its audience not to fear a demon from hell, but to confront a more unsettling question. If the power of a god were dropped at your feet, untethered from any higher morality, what would you become? Ryuk and Rem became the unforgettable faces of that question, ensuring that the Shinigami would forever be remembered not just as folkloric guides, but as complex characters in a timeless story about the intoxicating and corrosive nature of absolute power. Death Note's monumental success didn't just tell a story. It flung open a creative gateway, proving that the Shinigami concept was a fertile ground for innovation, capable of anchoring blockbuster series that could captivate a global audience. In its wake, a new generation of manga and anime creators looked at this ancient archetype and saw not just a folkloric spirit, but a versatile narrative engine, one they could fuse with the explosive action, deep world building, and character-driven drama that defines the shonen genre. This led to a creative explosion, a wave of series that took the core idea of a death god and rebuilt it from the ground up, each offering a radically different answer to the same fundamental question: what could a Shinigami be? Leading this charge was Tite Kubo's epic series Bleach, which premiered its manga just a year before Death Note and became a cornerstone of the genre for over a decade. Kubo's vision was arguably the most ambitious, transforming Shinigami into an entire race of supernatural warriors, a spiritual military police force known as the Gotai 13. In the world of Bleach, these are not solitary psychopomps. They are samurai-like guardians based in a sprawling afterlife metropolis called the Soul Society. Their duty is twofold: to guide purified souls to this afterlife and to combat the monstrous, corrupted spirits known as hollows. This framework completely recontextualizes their role. They are not merely facilitators of death, they are protectors of the balance between the world of the living and the dead. Their iconic weapons, the Zanpakuto, are each imbued with a unique spirit and name, granting powers that range from controlling ice to manipulating flower petals. This system of personalized power turned every Shinigami into a distinct character with their own backstory, motivations, and flashy special moves, perfectly aligning with shonen tropes of training, rivalry, and unlocking hidden potential. The protagonist, Ichigo Kurosaki, isn't a god of death by birth. He borrows the power, becoming a substitute Shinigami to protect his town. This human-centric gateway allowed the audience to project themselves into this vast, hierarchical world, learning its complex rules and history alongside him. Bleach took the Shinigami out of the shadows and put them in uniforms, giving them badges, ranks, and a very tangible sense of duty that resonated with themes of honor, sacrifice, and protecting one's comrade. While Bleach built a military organization, Atsushi Okubo's Soul Eater took the concept in a wildly imaginative and stylized direction. Here, Shinigami are still powerful authority figures, but the focus shifts to their apprentices and their unique weaponry. The setting is the Shinigami Technical School, a bizarre academy shaped like the titular death god's own head, run by the formidable but often comical Shinigami-sama. In this universe, the students training to become Meisters must partner with weapon companions, human descendants who can transform into powerful arms. And their collective mission is to collect the souls of evil humans and powerful witches to prevent the resurrection of a fearsome being known as the Kishin. The most brilliant twist in Soul Eater is the nature of the souls themselves. They are consumed by the titular death scythe, the ultimate weapon that Shinigami-sama wields. This creates a direct, almost literal link to the folkloric idea of the Shinigami collecting souls, but repackages it as a form of supernatural nutrition required to maintain cosmic order. The series is dripping with a signature gothic punk aesthetic where the fear of death is balanced by laugh-out-loud comedy and endearing character relationships. Soul Eater's Shinigami is a multifaceted leader. He is a goofy father figure to his son, a terrifying power when angered, and the administrator of a system that is both bizarre and rigorously logical. It demonstrated that the concept could be stretched to its absolute limits, embracing absurdity and heart in equal measure without losing its core identity as a force of death and balance. Adding a layer of aristocratic elegance and dark fantasy to the mix, Yona Toboso's Black Butler Kurashitsuji presents yet another masterful reinterpretation. In this Victorian-era setting, the Shinigami are a separate organization from the demons that feature prominently in the plot. They are a covert bureau of death gods who operate with the cold efficiency of a corporate office, complete with paperwork, filing cabinets, and a strict non-interference policy. Each Shinigami carries a customized death scythe not for combat, but for the precise cinematic recording of a soul's final moments. They are essentially supernatural auditors, ensuring that deaths proceed according to the official record. Their designs are meticulously tailored to reflect their personalities, from the flamboyant Undertaker with his piercing green eyes and maniacal laugh to the stern, glasses-wearing William T. Spears. Their detachment is their defining characteristic. They view humans with clinical curiosity or outright disdain, seeing them as fleeting assignments rather than sentient beings. This portrayal is a fascinating return to the bureaucratic roots of the Shinigami found in Edo period folklore, but amplified through a steampunk Gothic lens. They are the epitome of order amidst the series' central chaos, and their occasional clashes with the demonic elements of the story highlight a fascinating celestial power dynamic, suggesting that even in the underworld, different departments have different rules. This explosive period of creativity did more than just produce hit series. It fundamentally expanded the symbolic language of the Shinigami for a modern, global audience. They were no longer confined to the role of guide or tempter. They could be a heroic ideal to strive for, as in Bleach. They could be a quirky headmaster running a school for the macabre, as in Soul Eater. Or they could be impeccably dressed celestial accountants, as in Black Butler. Each iteration took a fragment of the traditional mythology, the collection of souls, the enforcement of fate, the bureaucratic duty, and built an entire universe around it. This wave proved that the Shinigami was one of Japanese storytelling's most durable and flexible concepts, an archetype that could be endlessly reinvented to explore themes of power, duty, life, and death itself through the thrilling, character-rich lens of anime and manga. While the vibrant worlds of anime and manga have defined the modern Shinigami for a global generation, the medium of live-action film and television in Japan has always provided a powerful counterpoint, grounding these spectral beings in a tangible, often chilling realism that taps directly into the deepest roots of their folklore. Japanese cinema, with its unique mastery of atmosphere and psychological dread, possesses an unparalleled ability to make the supernatural feel immediate and uncomfortably close, and its treatment of the death god is no exception. In the realm of serious J-horror, the Shinigami is rarely a character with dialogue or elaborate costume. Instead, it is an oppressive presence, an invisible force of nature whose influence is felt through a chilling disruption of the everyday world. Directors like Kiyoshi Kurosawa in films such as Seance or Pulse excel at this approach. Their Shinigami are not seen but sensed, a sudden drop in temperature, a figure glimpsed at the very edge of the frame, or a pervasive sense of wrongness that settles over a household marked for death. This technique draws a direct line back to the folkloric concept of kegare, or spiritual pollution, where death is not an event but a contagious atmosphere. The horror doesn't come from a jump scare, but from the agonizing realization that a character is already trapped within an inescapable fate, their life slowly being unraveled by an unseen hand. This live-action interpretation reminds us that the true terror of the Shinigami lies not in its appearance, but in its absolute, impersonal inevitability. Of course, Japanese television has also embraced the Shinigami, but often through a more accessible, narrative-driven lens. TV dramas, particularly the popular death game or mystery thriller genres, frequently employ the Shinigami as a central plot device, personifying it in a way that allows for character interaction while still maintaining its eerie essence. A common trope features a human who, through a strange twist of fate, gains the ability to see a Shinigami that is tethered to a specific person or location. These narratives unfold like supernatural detective stories, where the human protagonist, horrified by the impending death they can foresee, races against time to solve the mystery of why this fate is decreed or to find a loophole in the celestial rules. The live-action format makes these stories intensely personal. We see the human fear and desperation in the actor's eyes, and the Shinigami's cold indifference becomes far more unsettling when portrayed by a living person who can convey subtle menace through a mere glance or a slight, unnerving smile. This setup creates a powerful dramatic tension, exploring themes of mortality, empathy, and the ethical dilemma of knowing a future you are powerless to change. It translates the abstract fear of death into a relatable character drama, making the philosophical stakes of the folklore feel immediate and emotionally resonant. Yet, Japanese live action is not solely concerned with horror and dread. The medium has also proven to be a fantastic vehicle for exploring the more comedic and dramatic potential of the Shinigami archetype. There is a rich tradition of television shows and films that reimagine the death god as a clumsy apprentice, a world-weary salaryman exhausted by his grim job, or even a romantic lead caught in a forbidden love with a mortal. These interpretations use humor and pathos to explore the same core ideas from a completely different angle. A bumbling Shinigami who keeps failing to collect his assigned soul forces us to confront the absurdity of mortality and the bureaucratic absurdity that might underpin the universe. A romantic storyline between a human and a Shinigami becomes a poignant tragedy about the fundamental incompatibility of life and death, love and duty. By embodying these concepts with beloved actors and familiar dramatic tropes, live action makes the Shinigami strangely relatable. We laugh at their workplace frustrations and cry for their romantic sacrifices, which in turn allows these stories to deliver profound messages about cherishing our limited time and understanding the difficult, often lonely, responsibilities that keep the world in balance. The power of the live-action portrayal ultimately lies in its physicality. An animated Shinigami can be wildly creative and visually stunning, but a Shinigami portrayed by a human actor in a real-world location, a quiet suburban street, a cramped apartment, a bustling hospital hallway, carries a different kind of weight. The texture of their clothing, the sound of their footsteps, the way they occupy a space that looks just like our own, all of this bridges the gap between myth and reality in a uniquely potent way. It suggests that the boundary between our world and the next is thin, that these operators of fate could be walking among us right now, invisible and patient. This is the unique gift of Japanese live-action cinema and television. It doesn't just tell us a story about Shinigami, It makes us feel, if only for a moment, the chill of their presence in our own world, a haunting reminder of the delicate thread on which every life hangs. This journey through art, literature, and film brings us to one of the most interactive and widespread mediums of our time: video games. Here, the Shinigami undergoes yet another fascinating transformation, evolving from a narrative symbol into a set of quantifiable stats, abilities, and strategic options that players can literally command. Japanese role-playing games, or JRPG, have been particularly instrumental in translating these ancient death gods into digital form, weaving their mythological essence directly into the mechanics of gameplay. The monumental Shin Megami Tensei franchise, along with its more personal spin-off series Persona, stands as a masterclass in this digital alchemy. In these games, Shinigami are not just bosses or lore entries. They are recruitable demons, potential allies that the player can negotiate with, fuse together, and deploy in turn-based combat. This design choice is profoundly significant. It takes the awe-inspiring power over life and death and places it directly into the player's hands, allowing them to harness this primordial force as just one tool in a vast supernatural arsenal. The Shinigami in these games often possess abilities that perfectly mirror their folklore roles. They might command skills like Mudo or Hama, instant death spells that have a chance to obliterate ordinary enemies in a single strike. This mechanic beautifully translates the folkloric concept of an inevitable, fated end into a game of percentages and probability. Using a Shinigami in your party becomes a tactical gamble, a reflection of death's own unpredictable yet undeniable nature, where even the most powerful foe might be erased from existence with a lucky roll of the digital dice. Beyond their combat utility, these games deeply integrate the Shinigami into their complex mythological frameworks. The Shin Megami Tensei universe is a sprawling tapestry where deities, demons, and spirits from every world culture clash and coexist. Within this chaotic cosmology, the Shinigami are positioned as lawful neutral entities, unwavering enforcers of the natural cycle. Their dialogue when encountered often reflects this detached, bureaucratic duty. They speak of balance, the inevitability of expiration, and the folly of those who seek to cheat their destined end. This portrayal remains remarkably faithful to the Edo period concept of the Shinigami as celestial functionaries. By including them as one faction among many, the games present a multifaceted philosophical argument about the nature of existence. You can choose to side with the Shinigami and their vision of enforced order, or you can rebel against them, championing human free will and the defiance of fate, a core thematic conflict that makes these games so compelling. This interactive engagement forces the player to literally confront these death gods and decide for themselves where they stand on the moral spectrum of life and death. Of course, not all game appearances cast the Shinigami as a potential teammate. In many classic RPGs, they serve in their more traditional role as formidable boss monsters, guarding the gates to the afterlife or acting as the enforcers of a corrupt deity. A confrontation with a Shinigami boss is typically a major narrative event, a moment where the player must face the literal embodiment of mortality. These battles are often designed to be grueling tests of endurance and strategy, forcing the player to contend with status effects that represent the erosion of life, such as poison, curse, or straight-up instant death attacks. Overcoming such a foe is never just a matter of dealing enough damage. It's a symbolic victory over despair itself, a testament to the human spirit's refusal to succumb to the inevitable without a fight. This boss archetype reinforces the Shinigami's power and gravitas, reminding players that while death can be harnessed or temporarily defeated, it remains an eternal and respected force within the game's world. The influence even extends into the realm of puzzle and strategy games, where the core concept is abstracted into a unique gameplay mechanic. The critically acclaimed series The World Ends With You and its sequel Neo The World Ends With You present a modern-day Shibuya where the dead are forced to compete in a deadly game for a chance at resurrection. The organizers and judges of this game are the Reapers, a flamboyant and ruthless group that clearly draws immense inspiration from Shinigami lore. They are not mere monsters, they are stylized, charismatic, and terrifying game masters who wield the power of life and death over the participants. Their role is to create challenging and often lethal missions, eliminating players who fail. This setup brilliantly reimagines the Shinigami's duty for a contemporary, youth-oriented audience. They are the ultimate arbiters of a high-stakes system, blending the folkloric idea of a predetermined fate with the modern anxiety of competitive performance and social exclusion. The Reaper's game becomes a metaphor for the precariousness of life itself, where one wrong move can mean erasure, and the Shinigami are the cool, cruel, and utterly in control architects of it all. This seamless integration of Shinigami into interactive entertainment demonstrates the incredible flexibility of the archetype. Video games allow us to not just hear about or see these death gods, but to engage with their power on a fundamental level. We can recruit them, fight them, outsmart them, or even role-play as them. This interactivity demystifies the concept to a degree, making it a familiar part of a player's toolkit, but it also paradoxically reinforces the core mythology. By giving the player a taste of that power by letting them cast an instant death spell or command a Shinigami ally, games provide a visceral understanding of the awe and responsibility that comes with controlling the ultimate threshold. They transform the Shinigami from a distant specter of fear into an intimate part of our own stories of struggle, strategy, and triumph. While both the Shinigami and the Western Grim Reaper serve as personifications of death, a closer look reveals they are philosophical opposites, born from vastly different cultural understandings of mortality. The most immediate distinction lies in their very nature and number. The Grim Reaper is a singular, iconic figure, a universal constant cloaked in black, wielding a scythe, a solitary harvester moving through all of humanity. The Shinigami, by contrast, are rarely alone. They are a collective, a class of spiritual beings, often appearing in pairs or as a group of functionaries. This multiplicity reflects a world where death is not a monolithic force but a process managed by a diverse bureaucracy of the afterlife, each spirit perhaps specializing in a type of death or a region of the living world. Their core purpose and methods further highlight a profound cultural divide. The Grim Reaper is an active, causal agent of death. His iconic scythe is an instrument of harvesting. He cuts down lives, actively causing the end he represents. His approach is often portrayed as relentless and inevitable, but his action is the direct cause of the transition. The Shinigami, however, are almost never the cause of death itself. Their role is one of facilitation and guidance. They operate on the principle that a person's time of death is already preordained, written in a celestial ledger. Their job is not to decide who dies, but to ensure the soul of someone whose time has already come is properly escorted from the body and guided to the next world. They are less like a harvester and more like a celestial usher or a spiritual paramedic, there to manage a transition that is already underway, ensuring it happens smoothly and according to the cosmic plan. This leads to the most significant difference: the stories they inhabit and the lessons they impart. Encounters with the Grim Reaper in Western folklore are typically tales of horror, suspense, and cheated fate. Think of the classic trope of someone playing a game of chess with death for their life. The fear is of the Reaper himself, his sudden appearance, and the finality he brings. The narrative tension revolves around escaping him. Stories involving Shinigami, however, are most often intricate parables about fate, acceptance, and moral consequence. The tension isn't about escaping death, but about understanding the immutable nature of the celestial order. As we saw in the tale of the man who moved the sick, interfering with a Shinigami's duty doesn't save a life, it disrupts the natural balance and causes greater suffering. The Shinigami story is a lesson in Akuramaru, the acceptance of what cannot be changed, and a warning against the hubris of believing we can outsmart a destiny that is already written. Ultimately, these two figures hold up a mirror to the cultures that created them. The Grim Reaper emerged from a Western tradition that often views death as a fearsome adversary, a final enemy to be defeated or delayed through faith or cunning. He is external, hostile, and singular. The Shinigami evolved from a Japanese synthesis of Shinto and Buddhist thought, where death is a natural, sacred part of an endless cycle of rebirth, managed by a complex spiritual system. They are not an enemy to be fought, but a part of the natural order to be accepted. One represents a battle against the inevitable, the other represents a guided passage through it. This fundamental difference in philosophy is why the Shinigami can be portrayed as everything from a terrifying Oni demon to a beautiful, serene woman. They are not a symbol of fear, but a multifaceted representation of the most profound transition every life must make. To understand the place of Shinigami in modern Japan, we must step away from the pages of manga and the silver screen and into the quiet, solemn spaces of contemporary Shinto shrines and Buddhist temples. Here, amidst the scent of incense and the sound of prayers, the vibrant pop culture figure recedes, revealing a concept that is treated with a complex blend of reverence, distance, and academic interest. For the most part, you will not find altars dedicated to Shinigami or priests performing rituals in their name. Within the orthodox frameworks of both Shinto and Buddhism today, Shinigami are generally not considered genuine objects of worship or spiritual entities in the same way that Kami or Buddhas are. Instead, they are most often categorized as a form of cultural folklore or a symbolic artifact, a powerful narrative that emerged from the popular imagination to explain the unexplainable rather than a doctrinal truth. In modern Shinto, which maintains its focus on the veneration of nature spirits and the celebration of life, there is a natural reluctance to engage directly with personifications of death. The concept of kegare, or spiritual pollution associated with death, still holds a powerful, though more subtle, influence on practice. This creates an inherent tension with the idea of a death spirit. A Shinto priest might acknowledge the Shinigami as a fascinating element of Edo period folk belief, a story that people once told to make sense of mortality. However, they would be quick to distinguish these tales from the core of their faith, which is centered on life-affirming rituals, harvest festivals, and prayers for worldly benefits like health and prosperity. The Shinigami exists in a separate box, a compelling piece of cultural storytelling, but not a part of active shrine worship or theological doctrine. You are far more likely to encounter rituals aimed at appeasing or pacifying restless spirits, known as goryo or onryo, which serve a similar social function of managing the anxiety around death without explicitly celebrating a deity of death itself. Buddhism, with its extensive philosophical architecture built around the cycle of death and rebirth, provides a more nuanced theological ground for the Shinigami concept. However, even here, contemporary Buddhist priests and scholars tend to view them as a personification of a process, not a literal being. The functions of the Shinigami guiding souls, enforcing karmic destiny, are already expertly handled by the existing bureaucracy of the afterlife within Buddhist cosmology. Judge Enma and his court, the ox head and horse face guards, and the belief in the 49-day journey between death and rebirth provide a complete system that leaves little room for the more modern, folkloric Shinigami to be incorporated as a legitimate object of veneration. A Buddhist scholar might explain that the Shinigami is a useful metaphorical device, a way to make the abstract law of karma more relatable and narrative-friendly for the average person. It is a teaching tool, a folkloric echo of the more formal and complex principles of cause and effect that govern existence. This perspective is echoed by many religious studies academics in Japan, who point out that the Shinigami's popularity peaked during a specific socio-economic period, the Edo era, and served specific societal needs. They were narratives of control and comfort, explaining suffering and enforcing social order by framing death as an inescapable part of a grand, preordained plan. In today's modern, secular Japan, where death is largely medicalized and managed by hospitals rather than explained by folklore, the need for such a personification has diminished. The Shinigami has thus transitioned from a potential object of superstition to a recognized cultural icon, studied for what it reveals about the Japanese psyche and historical anxieties rather than feared as a real spiritual threat. Yet, to say that the Shinigami has no place in modern spirituality would be an oversimplification. While absent from official doctrine, its spirit persists at the edges of practice, particularly in what might be termed new religions or personal spiritual beliefs. Some modern spiritualists or practitioners of what is often called occult culture in Japan might engage with the Shinigami concept as a kind of archetype or energy, a representation of transition and an ending that makes way for a new beginning. Furthermore, the underlying function of the Shinigami remains deeply relevant. The desire for a guided, peaceful transition at the end of life is a universal human hope. In this sense, while people may not pray to a specific Shinigami, the Buddhist rituals performed for the dying chanting sutras to ease their fear and guide their consciousness toward a favorable rebirth serve the exact same purpose that folklore assigned to the death god. The priest or the family member at the bedside becomes the compassionate guide, performing the role that stories once attributed to a spectral figure. The Shinigami, therefore, has not vanished from the spiritual landscape so much as it has been demythologized. Its core purpose has been absorbed into the compassionate practices that surround death, ensuring that no one has to make the final journey alone. Even as Shinigami dominate the world of anime and games, they have not abandoned their original home in the shadowy corners of human fear. The ancient folkloric impulse that gave birth to them is very much alive, finding new life in the digital age through modern urban legends and chilling tales of supposed real-life encounters. The internet has become the new village square, the modern equivalent of the Edo period storybook, where new myths are forged and shared at lightning speed, and the Shinigami has evolved once again to haunt our contemporary anxieties. These are not the bureaucratic warriors of Bleach or the nihilistic gamers of Death Note. These are raw, personal, and terrifying accounts that tap into the primal fear of an unseen death spirit walking among us. One of the most pervasive modern legends revolves around the concept of the Shinigami room, or death god's apartment. In these stories, which spread like wildfire on Japanese image boards and forums like 2channel, a person moves into a new, surprisingly affordable apartment, only to discover a strange, unsettling phenomenon. They might find a single, ominous black spot on the ceiling that seems to grow darker each day, or they might be plagued by recurring dreams of a tall, thin figure standing silently in a specific corner of the room. The horror escalates subtly, a constant feeling of being watched, a pervasive chill that no heater can dispel, or household pets that refuse to enter the room, hissing at empty space. The terrifying climax of the story often comes from a chance meeting with an elderly neighbor who reveals the unit's history. The previous tenant died by suicide or under mysterious circumstances, and locals whisper that a Shinigami has taken up residence there, waiting to claim the next soul. This legend perfectly adapts the folkloric belief to modern urban loneliness and economic anxiety. The affordable apartment is a relatable desire, and the hidden, supernatural danger reflects deep-seated fears about the unseen histories of our living spaces and the isolating nature of city life. Another common thread in modern encounter stories involves technology, blurring the line between the spiritual and the digital. Tales circulate of people receiving cryptic, delayed text messages from a deceased friend's phone number, often containing a single, haunting character or a timestamp that matches the exact moment of their death. Others speak of Shinigami GPS, where a navigation app glitches and directs a driver down a deserted, foggy road that doesn't appear on any map, only for them to encounter a pale, disoriented figure walking in the middle of the roadway who vanishes as the car approaches. These stories transform the Shinigami from a feudal-era spirit into a glitch in the modern matrix, an entity that can hijack our technology to facilitate its grim work. It reflects a contemporary fear not of the dark forest, but of our own devices turning against us and becoming conduits for ancient, malevolent forces. The global rise of creepypasta user-generated horror stories designed to be copied and pasted across the internet has provided a fertile new ground for the Shinigami to evolve. While Western creepypasta gave us Slender Man, Japanese and Western creators alike have begun crafting new digital myths around the death god. These stories often blend traditional elements with modern horror tropes. One popular archetype is the Shinigami Challenge or Death Game, where a website or social media account supposedly run by a Shinigami dares users to complete a series of tasks. The initial challenges might seem like harmless, eerie fun, but they gradually escalate in danger, with the final challenge inevitably leading to the participant's death. This narrative directly echoes the folkloric Jugoku Tsuhai, the Hell's Messenger that tempts people to their doom, but it's repackaged for a generation raised on online viral trends and the dark underbelly of social media, making the ancient concept of supernatural temptation feel terrifyingly current. Perhaps the most significant evolution in the internet age is the democratization of the myth itself. In the past, stories were curated by playwrights and authors. Today, anyone can contribute to the legend. Forums are filled with first-hand accounts or genuine experiences posted by anonymous users. Someone might describe seeing a pair of unusually tall, well-dressed men in black standing motionless at a train platform during a suicide incident, only to have them vanish moments later. Another might recount a childhood memory of a fever dream where a beautiful woman in a white kimono sat at their bedside, not as a comfort, but as a silent sentinel waiting for their fever to break one way or another. The power of these accounts lies in their ambiguity and their anonymity. We can never know if they are truth, creative writing, or misremembered trauma, and that uncertainty is where the myth thrives. The internet hasn't killed the Shinigami, it has given it infinite new shadows to hide in, ensuring that this ancient god of death continues to evolve, adapt, and send a chill down the spine of a whole new generation, proving that our need to give a face to our greatest fear is as timeless as fear itself. But why do we do this? Why do cultures across the world, from ancient civilizations to modern societies, feel this deep, almost primal need to give a face and a form to the one experience that is, by its very nature, formless and faceless? The Shinigami, in all their evolving complexity, are far more than just spooky stories. They are a profound psychological projection, a mirror humanity holds up to its own deepest fears and most urgent desires for understanding. To personify death is to engage in one of our most fundamental coping mechanisms. The unknown is terrifying. The concept of non-existence, of simply ceasing to be, is an abstraction so vast and frightening that the human mind struggles to comprehend it. By creating a being like the Shinigami, we transform that overwhelming, abstract void into something tangible. We give it a shape we can recognize, rules we can learn, and even a personality we might potentially reason with or appeal to. This act of personification makes the incomprehensible manageable. It's far less terrifying to imagine a spirit with a ledger ensuring a natural order than it is to confront the chaotic, random possibility that death could come for anyone at any time for no reason at all. The Shinigami provides a framework, a terrible but logical system that replaces existential dread with a narrative we can follow. This narrative function is crucial. Once death has a persona, it can be woven into stories, and stories are humanity's oldest and most powerful tool for teaching morality and social values. The Shinigami doesn't just collect souls, it embodies a lesson. The countless Edo period tales of humans trying to cheat or outsmart a death spirit, only to cause greater suffering, weren't just entertainment. They were clear, potent parables about the dangers of greed, the folly of arrogance, and the vital importance of accepting one's designated place in the grand scheme of things, a concept known as ukiyo-e. A society that believes in a celestial ledger enforced by watchful spirits is a society that encourages its people to live righteously, to value their allotted time, and to accept misfortune not as random cruelty, but as part of a larger, if mysterious, plan. The Shinigami becomes the ultimate teacher of Akarimaru, the graceful acceptance of things that cannot be changed. This narrative structure provides immense comfort. It suggests that even the most painful loss has a reason, a purpose within a cosmic order, making the unbearable slightly easier to bear. Furthermore, by creating a deity or spirit of death, we effectively create a counterpart to the gods of life and creation, establishing a sense of balance in the universe. In Japanese mythology, this balance is beautifully illustrated by the pair of creator deities, Izanagi and Izanami. Izanagi is associated with life and the world of the living, while Izanami, after her descent to Yomi, becomes the ruler of the dead. This duality reflects a deep-seated human need to see the universe as a balanced system of opposing yet complementary forces, light and dark, creation and destruction, life and death. The Shinigami, in its many forms, completes this circle. It is the necessary counterweight that makes life itself precious and meaningful. Without the finality that the Shinigami represents, life would have no stakes, no urgency, and no value. This personification allows us to conceptually grapple with this balance, to acknowledge the darkness without being completely consumed by it, because we have given it a name and a defined role to play. We are able to accept the terrifying truth that death is a part of life by convincing ourselves that both are managed by conscious, intentional forces, making the universe feel less like a chaotic accident and more like a carefully ordered story where every being, even the god of death, has its part to play. The global fascination with Shinigami has transcended the screen and the page, manifesting as a powerful force in the real-world landscape of Japan through a booming niche of pop culture tourism. This phenomenon sees fans from across the globe embarking on pilgrimages to locations that have become sacred ground within the narratives of their favorite series, transforming abstract stories into tangible, visitable destinations. The economic and cultural impact of this trend is profound, creating a vibrant dialogue between fiction and reality that benefits local economies and offers fans a unique form of immersive connection. It's no longer just about consuming the story. It's about walking in the footsteps of the characters and physically touching the world where these epic tales of life and death unfolded. One of the most iconic examples of this is the journey fans make to track down the real-life locations used in the live-action adaptations of Death Note. While the anime presents a stylized version of Japan, the films grounded the story in actual Tokyo landmarks. The bustling Shinjuku district, with its neon-lit streets and massive video screens, becomes the backdrop for Light Yagami's god complex. The sprawling, futuristic architecture of the Mode Gakuen Cocoon Tower in Shinjuku is often cited by fans as a fitting visual representation of the series' modern, cold aesthetic. Pilgrims meticulously compare screenshots from the films with the cityscape, seeking out the specific bridges, pedestrian crosswalks, and alleyways where key scenes were shot. This isn't merely sightseeing, it's an act of participation, a way to momentarily inhabit the same space as the characters and feel the weight of the story's moral dilemmas in a real-world context. The tourism industry has enthusiastically embraced this demand, leading to the creation of expertly curated themed tours. Specialized agencies now offer anime pilgrimage packages that guide visitors through these iconic spots, complete with background trivia and photo opportunities designed for the perfect social media post. Beyond Death Note, other series with Shinigami elements contribute to this trend. For instance, the vibrant, historic setting of Kyoto provides the inspiration for the Soul Society in Bleach, and fans often visit the city's ancient temples and narrow streets to capture the atmosphere of the series. The city of Fukuoka, the hometown of Bleach creator Tite Kubo, has also seen an influx of visitors, with local businesses occasionally hosting special events or putting up displays to celebrate their connection to the global phenomenon. The experience extends beyond outdoor locations into dedicated commercial spaces designed for full immersion. Themed cafes pop up regularly, often as limited-time collaborations to promote a new film, game, or anniversary. Imagine ordering a dessert modeled after Ryuk's beloved apples, complete with a decorative Death Note sketch beside the plate, or drinking a coffee from a mug adorned with symbols from the Gotai 13. These establishments are meticulously designed, with waitstaff often wearing costumes inspired by the series and menus filled with puns and references that true fans will instantly recognize. It's a multi-sensory experience that allows visitors to taste and share in the culture of the story, creating memorable moments that are as much about community as they are about consumption. For those seeking a more refined cultural experience, museums and art exhibitions have stepped in to elevate Shinigami from pop culture to high art. The Sujinami Animation Museum in Tokyo, for example, has featured exhibits on the art of Bleach, displaying original production cells, character design sheets, and storyboards that reveal the incredible craftsmanship behind the animation. These exhibitions frame the work not just as entertainment, but as a significant modern artistic achievement, worthy of study and appreciation. They attract not only hardcore fans, but also art students and cultural scholars, broadening the audience and legitimizing the medium's impact. This museumification of anime acknowledges its powerful role in shaping contemporary Japanese identity and sharing it with the world, proving that the stories of Shinigami are not fleeting trends but lasting contributions to the nation's cultural heritage. Yet for all their modern popularity, a chasm of misunderstanding often separates the pop culture Shinigami from their nuanced folkloric roots. Many viewers, especially those introduced to these beings through action-packed anime, walk away with a set of assumptions that would be utterly foreign to the original storytellers of the Edo period. It's time to set the record straight and debunk some of the most persistent myths, peeling back the layers of artistic license to reveal the profound and complex reality of Japan's gods of death. Perhaps the most crucial correction concerns their moral alignment. The modern shonen genre, built on clear conflicts between heroes and villains, often slots Shinigami into convenient boxes. Some are benevolent allies, while others are monstrous antagonists, but in their traditional context, applying a simple good or evil label is a fundamental misreading. The Shinigami is better understood as a neutral force of nature, an amoral functionary in the cosmic machinery. Think of them not as a villain, but as a gravitational force. It doesn't act out of malice when an apple falls from a tree. It simply enforces a fundamental law of the universe. Their purpose is to maintain balance, ensuring the cycle of life and death continues without interruption. A traditional Shinigami doesn't kill out of hatred or enjoy suffering. It performs a duty. This is why many folktales portray them with a sense of weary resignation rather than malevolent glee. They are doing a job that must be done, one that is as inevitable and impersonal as the turning of the seasons. This concept removes the stigma of evil from death itself, reframing it not as a punishment but as a natural, necessary transition. Another common misconception is the idea that Shinigami lore springs from a single, authoritative sacred text, much like the Greek gods from the works of Hesiod or the Norse from the Eddas. People often search for the Bible of the Shinigami, a quest that is destined for frustration. Unlike the structured pantheons of some Western mythologies, the Shinigami is a product of organic, bottom-up folklore. Its origins are scattered and diffuse, woven together from 1,000 different threads. There is no definitive ancient volume where they are first described. Instead, their image was slowly assembled over centuries through a collaborative process of storytelling. Elements were borrowed from Buddhist art, where judges and demons of the underworld provided a visual template. Ideas were adapted from traveling tales and local ghost stories. Theatrical playwrights then codified these concepts for the stage, and woodblock artists gave them a lasting visual form. The Shinigami is a mosaic, not a monument. Its power comes from its fluidity and its ability to absorb and reflect the fears, values, and anxieties of the common people across different regions and eras, not from the decree of a priestly class or a singular ancient author. This leads directly to the third major misunderstanding, the reduction of the Shinigami to a simple monster or a villain to be defeated. Modern media, especially games, often turns them into end-level bosses, their defeat the ultimate goal of the hero's journey. This flips the traditional dynamic entirely. In folklore, you cannot defeat a Shinigami in a final battle any more than you can defeat thunder or tide. The most a clever human might achieve is a temporary delay or a bureaucratic loophole, as in the tale of the man who moved the sick. But these stories always end with the same lesson. The natural order reasserts itself, often with worse consequences for the meddler. The Shinigami is not an obstacle to be overcome through strength or courage. It is a reality to be accepted with wisdom and grace. Their traditional role is one of guidance and facilitation, not conquest. They are the ushers in the theater of existence, not the antagonists of the play. Recognizing this shifts our perspective from seeing death as an enemy to be vanquished to understanding it as a passage to be navigated, a transition made less terrifying by the presence of a guide, however stern that guide may be. By disentangling these myths from the media, we don't diminish the modern stories. We actually enrich our appreciation of them, allowing us to see the deep, ancient well of meaning from which these captivating contemporary characters draw their power. Their enduring power lies not in a single terrifying image, but in their incredible flexibility as a narrative vessel. The Shinigami is a concept so fundamentally adaptable that it can be poured into any genre mold, from gothic horror to futuristic thriller, and emerge with its core essence intact. This chameleonic quality allows storytellers to use them as a perfect tool to explore the specific anxieties of their time. In the stable but socially rigid Edo period, they were cautionary figures enforcing acceptance of one's station. In the booming, bureaucratic Meiji era, they became weary office workers. For a modern audience grappling with digital saturation and existential uncertainty, they transform into nihilistic gamers or rule-bound systems analysts. The Shinigami's shape shifts to hold the fears of the society that imagines it, providing a familiar framework through which to process new and complex forms of dread. This makes them perpetually relevant. They are a constant in form only, their meaning endlessly renewed to mirror whatever it is we currently fear about the end. Beyond their narrative utility, Shinigami remain captivating because they give tangible form to humanity's most profound philosophical questions. They are the walking, talking embodiment of the mystery that every conscious mind must eventually confront. What does it mean to die? Is there a purpose or a plan to our existence? How do we live a meaningful life in the shadow of its inevitable end? The Shinigami doesn't answer these questions so much as it personifies the asking of them. A story featuring one is inherently a story about mortality, forcing both its characters and its audience to grapple with these ultimate concerns. They are the externalized representation of our own internal wrestling with fate, morality, and the value of our fleeting time. By putting a face on the void, they make these overwhelming abstractions something we can engage with, debate, and even challenge within the safe container of a story. They turn an existential crisis into a conversation, and sometimes into a battle we can visually follow. This leads to their unique ability to explore the concept of death from multiple, often contradictory, angles within the same cultural mythos. The Shinigami can simultaneously represent cold, impersonal fate and deeply personal tragedy. They can be the stern but fair administrator of cosmic justice in one tale, and in the very next, a predatory tempter exploiting human weakness. This duality is not a flaw in the mythology, it is its greatest strength. It honestly reflects our own deeply conflicted feelings about death. We fear its inevitability, yet we seek comfort in the idea of an order to the universe. We rage against the dying of the light, yet we hope for a gentle guide when our own time comes. The Shinigami holds space for all these contradictions, allowing a single culture to explore every facet of its relationship with mortality without needing to settle on a single, definitive truth. They are both the monster and the midwife, the enemy and the escort, and in that complexity we see our own complicated hearts reflected. Crucially, their legacy is secured by their continual reinvention. Unlike static figures from closed mythologies, the Shinigami are a living tradition, constantly being remade by each new generation of artists, writers, and gamers. This is not a dilution of the original concept, but a validation of its core power. A folkloric spirit becomes a Kabuki character, who then inspires a woodblock print, which fuels a novelist's imagination, whose work lays the groundwork for a global anime phenomenon. Each iteration borrows from the past but adds its own unique voice, ensuring the idea never grows stale or irrelevant. This creative conversation across centuries means that a teenager today encountering Ryuk in Death Note is, whether they know it or not, engaging with a narrative thread that stretches back to the ghost stories told by candlelight in Edo. The Shinigami is a collaborative masterpiece written by the collective imagination of Japan over hundreds of years, and that collaboration is still vibrantly alive today. Ultimately, the Shinigami endures because it is more than a story. It is a profound and elegant coping mechanism, a way to practice making peace with the one truth we cannot change. By repeatedly telling stories about these death gods, we rehearse for our own final act. We explore scenarios of resistance and acceptance, of fear and grace, all from the safety of the audience. We see characters cheat death and learn the consequences, or we watch them meet it with dignity and find a strange kind of victory. The Shinigami provides a narrative playground where we can safely confront the unimaginable, and in doing so, it helps to demystify it. They teach us that death is not an error or a punishment, but a part of a vast and intricate system of which we are all a part. In a world that often tries to hide from death, the Shinigami insists we look it directly in its ever-changing face, and in that act of courageous looking, we may just find a deeper, more precious appreciation for the beautiful, fragile, and temporary gift of life itself. From the ancient Shinto understanding of death as a form of spiritual pollution to their current status as global anime icons, the journey of the Shinigami is a breathtaking reflection of Japan's own cultural evolution. We began with a world where death was an abstract force, managed through ritual and respected from a distance, a concept that had no need for a single personified reaper. We saw how the arrival of Buddhism introduced a structured cosmic bureaucracy, complete with the stern judge Enma and his demonic enforcers, planting the seed for a divine agent of death. Then, in the bustling creativity of the Edo period, that seed blossomed. Influenced by Western ideas of the Grim Reaper, Japanese storytellers synthesized a completely new being. The Shinigami, a death spirit born from a crossroads of cultures and tailored to the anxieties and values of its time. No longer just a distant underworld ruler, the Shinigami stepped onto the Kabuki stage and into the pages of cheap woodblock booklets, becoming a familiar, though fearsome, figure in the popular imagination. This was never a static myth. These death gods proved to be incredibly versatile, their stories and appearances shifting to meet the needs of every region and generation. In the snowy north, they became patient hunters linked to the harsh winter. In the trading ports of the south, they acted as communal assessors of a family's piety. They were portrayed as everything from beautiful women offering a serene release to shadowy pairs ensuring a preordained fate was met. Their core purpose, however, remained constant. They were not the cause of death, but its facilitators. They were the guides ensuring a soul's safe passage, the solemn witnesses to a thread of life reaching its natural end, the administrators of a cosmic order that valued balance above all else. This nuanced role sets them apart fundamentally from the Grim Reaper of the West, making them not a monstrous enemy to be defeated, but a respected, if awe-inspiring, part of the natural cycle. And now, in our modern era, the Shinigami has undergone its most radical and widespread transformation. Through the global power of manga and anime, they have been reborn as complex characters in their own right. They are the bored tricksters like Ryuk, the noble warriors of the Gotai 13, the quirky headmasters of Death Weapon Meister Academy, and the impeccably dressed auditors of the Black Butler universe. Each new incarnation, from the psychological depth of modern literature to the pixelated power of video game allies, adds another layer to this rich mythology. They are no longer just folkloric figures. They are versatile narrative vessels used to explore contemporary themes of existential boredom, the weight of responsibility, the corruption of power, and the very meaning of life in a complex world. This incredible journey from a concept of ritual purity to a pop culture powerhouse cements the Shinigami's unique role. They are both a Chinese letter inspiring folk deity and an endlessly adaptable pop culture phenomenon, a bridge between Japan's profound spiritual past and its dynamic creative present. They show us that mythology is not a relic locked in ancient texts, but a living, breathing force that grows and changes with us. So what can these gods of death ultimately teach us about life? Perhaps it is the profound value of acceptance, of understanding that life is precious precisely because it is finite. The Shinigami reminds us that our time is measured, not to inspire fear, but to give our choices weight and our connections meaning. They are the constant, gentle pressure in the background of our consciousness, encouraging us to live fully, act with purpose, and cherish the beautiful, fleeting story we are each writing with our lives. Now we'd love to hear from you. Which portrayal of a Shinigami resonates most deeply with you? Is it the folkloric guide, the weary bureaucrat, or the charismatic anime hero? Share your favorite in the comments below, and as always, thank you for joining us on this journey into the heart of